Hi everybody, hope you're doing okay and welcome to the next geography lesson in our unit. So I'm Mr. Antal and today we're going to be comparing the climate of Brazil to the climate of here in the United Kingdom. So last lesson rather, we just looked at the climate of Brazil, and today we're going to be doing the climate of UK and Brazil and comparing the two. So let's get started. I'm just going to share my screen. So our learning question today is, how is the weather in Brazil different to the weather in the UK? So this is the 7th lesson in our unit. So we're going to be looking at, and you're getting really good at this now, the 7 continents of the world and finding where Brazil is on the map. And then we're going to be looking at what the climate of the UK is like, and how does this weather change in different seasons. And finally, we're going to compare all of this information to an area that we've looked at in Brazil last lesson. So lots to get through today. Before we get going though, as always, you're going to need the usual bits and pieces. So you're going to need some paper, a pencil, and your super big geography brain. So if you want to pause the video, if you need to go and get those pieces, you can go and get those bits and pieces right now. Okay, great. Let's get started with our first challenge. So my first challenge for you guys today is to see if you can remember all 7 continents of the world, and can you name them all in less than 30 seconds? So I'm going to show you a world map and I want you to shout out the names of all those continents that you can remember. So on your marks, get set, go. Excellent. Did you manage to remember them all? Let's have a check. So we have North America, continent of North America. Well done if you got that one. Africa in the middle there. Asia. Australia. We'll accept Australasia or Oceania as well, remember. Antarctica at the bottom, very cold down there. Europe, that's where the UK is based, into the continent of Europe. And South America. Did you remember all 7? Well done. If you did, give yourself a big pat on your back. Now, can you remember what continent we need to zoom in on to find out where Brazil is? Can you remember which one it is? Well done, it's South America. South America. So here's our map of South America. I want you to point to where you can find Brazil. Can you point it? Well done. Here's Brazil, just around this area here. So that's what we're going to be looking at partly today. Okay. So previously we looked at the climate of Brazil. And in this lesson, we're going to compare that climate with the climate of the UK. Now, first of all, we just need a little recap of what we looked at last week. So we know that Brazil is a huge country. And because Brazil is such a large country, the climate changes depending on where you are in different parts of Brazil. So on the screen in front of you, you can see a map showing different climate zones in Brazil. If you have a look at the darker blue areas, you can see that they have warm temperatures and lots of rain all year around. Whereas if you look at the red and orange areas, they're very warm, but also very dry all year round. So those areas are more desert-like. And then down in the south, Down in the south of Brazil, you can see these are more green areas and they have different summer and winter seasons. So a little bit more like in the UK here, where we have different seasons as well. And their climate is more mild. So it's warmer in the summer and colder in the winter in those areas. Okay, I'm going to give you a quick challenge now. I'm going to tell you a different type of weather. I want you to point to that area on the map where we can find it. And see if you can do that really quickly. So first of all, I want you to point on your screen on the map to the place that has very hot and dry weather. Off you go. Okay, hopefully you managed to find that part on the east side of Brazil. So you've got that red and orange part of the map where it's hot and dry. And those are desert regions like the region of Caatinga that we've spoken about before and learnt about. Now I want you to find an area that has a milder climate. So not too hot, not too cold, and has different seasons. Point to that area on the map now. Did you manage to find it? That was the green area on the climate map. So it's down at the bottom or in the south of Brazil. Final challenge. Can you find the area that is hot and wet all year round? Point to that bit on your map. Okay, hopefully you managed to find that dark blue area in the north of Brazil, particularly in the northwest, which is where the Amazon is. But you can also see some more in the northeast as well. So now we've got a good idea of those different climate zones that we can find in Brazil. Now let's have a think about the climate in the UK. So what's the climate like here in the United Kingdom? Now we know that compared to Brazil, the UK is much, much smaller. So it's much smaller than Brazil, okay? And because it's so much smaller than Brazil, the UK doesn't have a lot of climate zones. So in Brazil, there are lots of different climates all around the country, whereas here in the UK, the climate stays the same, more or less around the whole country. Here in the UK, it's generally, the climate that we have is cool summers, so not as hot as we have in some countries around the world, and colder winters, but still not as cold as other places on Earth. Now, Northern Ireland, Wales, and the southwest of England are usually the mildest, the wettest, and the windiest regions, and that's because they're near the Atlantic Ocean on the west side of the United Kingdom. And the temperatures in the north of England and in Scotland are often a little bit cooler than they are in other places in the UK. So there are some slight differences in different parts of the UK, but generally the climate of the UK is the same throughout the country, whereas in Brazil, there are lots of different climate zones. So we're going to take a pause and I've got a task for you. So let's just have a quick recap here of our different areas of the UK. So the UK does not have different climate zones like Brazil. The climate of the UK is generally cooler in summers, has cooler summers than some countries, and colder winters, but not as cold as some places like the North Pole or places like that. And in Northern Ireland, Wales, and the southwest of England, these are usually the mildest, wettest, and windiest regions. Why is that? Because they are close to the Atlantic Ocean. Well done if you remembered that one. And the last bit, the temperatures in northern England and Scotland are often cooler than the rest of the country. So well done if you've remembered those bits. So here's your task. Why does Brazil have so many more different climate zones than the UK? And you've got a sentence starter to help you here. So it says Brazil has more different climate zones than the UK because... So think back to what you've just learned about climate of Brazil and the climate of the UK. Why does Brazil have so many more different climate zones than the UK? Pause the video now and say or write that sentence to finish it off. Okay, Great work. So you should have said or written something like Brazil has a much more different climate zone than the UK because it is a much larger country, or it's a lot bigger than the UK. And that's why there are different climate zones in Brazil, more so than in the United Kingdom. Good. Now, let's have a think about how the weather in the UK changes during different seasons. Let's just have a quick recap of these words that we looked at last lesson of climate and weather. So the climate is the average weather conditions in a particular place or location. That means it's what you would expect to see in certain areas regarding the climate. So it's what you expect on average, the climate to be in a certain area, whereas the weather, on the other side, the weather is the condition of the atmosphere at that particular time. So the weather might be different from Saturday to Monday, but the climate is what you would expect in a certain area, and that stays the same. So the climate is what we expect, and the weather is what we get on a certain day. Now, before we look at the seasonal changes in the UK, I want you to have a look around the area where you live and where you are right now. So what's the weather like where you live today? And how does this change at different times of the year? So you've got some sentence starters to help you on the screen. I'll show you what I might say. So I live in Dorset. Today in Dorset, the weather is wet and cold. Pretty miserable out there. This changes at different times of the year. For example, in the summer, it's usually quite warm and often sunny. And in winter, the temperature is a lot lower. So it's usually a lot colder and a lot cloudier in the wintertime. So have a look out of your window, see what the weather's like, where you live today, and fill in the gaps in the sentences. Off you go. Okay, fantastic work. So let's have a look now at how the weather changes within the UK at different times of the year. So temperature and rainfall in the UK does not vary as much in different parts like it does in Brazil, because as we already know, the UK is a lot smaller as a country than Brazil. So the climate stays more or less the same, but the temperature and the level of rainfall does go up and down depending on different times of the year. So here we have some statistics, so some facts about different average temperatures throughout the year in the UK. So we can see that in January, the average temperature is 4 degrees Celsius. We can see that in April, it is 9 degrees. And then in August, it is 17 degrees. So you can see that in August, it's usually hotter than it is in April or January, because that's when we in the UK have our summertime. And then if you look at the bottom row here, we have average rainfall, which is in millimeters. So remember, we measure rainfall in millimeters of how much rain falls on the ground. So we have 65 millimeters on average in January. We have 48 in April, and we have 136 in August, which is a bit of a surprise. Now this can change year on year, but this is just an average taken over 1 year in the UK. So we can see that generally the temperatures are quite cool, so not too hot, and the rainfall changes depending on different seasons. So we've got more rainfall in the summer months of August than we do in April, for example. Now let's see how that's different to one area of Brazil that we've looked at last week. And this is the city of Manaus, which is located in the northwest of Brazil. So this is the area near where the Amazon rainforest is. Let's have a look at those average temperatures and rainfall. So the average temperature in Manaus in January is 26 degrees. And the same in April. And then it's the same in August, pretty much the same. It's 27, so very close. So you can see it doesn't change that much throughout the year at all. Only 1 degree difference in those months. Whereas here in the United Kingdom, if we just go back a slide, the temperature changes a lot throughout different months. So you've got 4 degrees in January, pretty cold, going up to 9 in April, and then up to 17 in August. That's a big change. So the temperature goes up and down depending on the seasons. Whereas in Manaus, we just have a look back at Manaus, it stays the same more or less throughout that time. And you might notice also the temperatures in Manaus are a lot higher than the United Kingdom. So 26 or 27 degrees is a lot higher than 4 or 9 or 17. So in general, it's a lot hotter in Manaus throughout the year than it is ever in the United Kingdom. So then let's have a look at the average rainfall. So the bottom row. In January, 264 millimeters of rainfall on average in Manaus. April, we've got 311, so going up. And then in August, just 47 millimeters of rainfall. So let's compare that with the UK. In the UK, we've got 65 millimeters, then we had 48, and then 136. So in general, there's a lot less rainfall in the UK than there is in Manaus, the northwest region of Brazil. So you can see here, the numbers are a lot higher on the bottom row of that table. So there's a lot more rainfall in Manaus, in the northwest of Brazil, than there is here in the UK. Okay, so now we've started comparing already how the climate of the weather in Brazil is different to the climate of the UK. So let's have a look at some of those facts and compare the two countries together. So have a look at Brazil on the left-hand column. In Brazil, there's lots of different climate zones, and we already know that because the country is so big. And there were lots of different climate zones throughout the country, whereas in the UK, the climate is similar throughout the country. So because it's a lot smaller, there are less different climate zones and the climate stays the same. In Brazil, not all places have set seasons. So we saw in Manaus that the temperature stays more or less the same throughout the year, whereas in the UK, the temperature goes up and down depending on the season. So the UK has set seasons like spring, summer, winter, and autumn, whereas in Brazil, not all the places have that. We also know that in Brazil, in general, the temperatures are higher than they are in the UK. And generally in Brazil, there is more rainfall. So it rains more particularly in the northwest of Brazil. So that location of Manaus that we looked at, that's one where it rains a lot. And there's less rainfall in the UK than there is in most of Brazil. So those are some of the things that are different between the two countries. Right, one more challenge for you to take away from our lesson today. So over the next week, could you make your own weather chart for where you live? So every day, can you write down the temperature? So how hot it is, and you can either find that online, or if somebody has a smartphone, they can often find it on there as well. So what's the temperature like each day? And also, what is the weather like? So is it raining? Is it sunny? Is it cold? Is it cloudy? Maybe it's even snowing. So can you go through one whole week and write down the weather and the temperature each day where you live? And then I want you to think about how that is similar or different to the weather in Brazil. So that's my challenge for you to take away from our lesson today. Okay, that's all we've got time for in our geography lesson today, guys. I've liked comparing those two different climates of Brazil and the UK, and I hope you've got on well with it too. As always, please share any great work that you've done with your teachers. And in our next lesson, we're going to be continuing to learn about the geography of Brazil. I think we've got 2 or 3 more lessons now. You've been doing fantastically so well so far, and I look forward to seeing you next time. So take care. Bye-bye.